Geezer Bandit is the nickname of an unknown man who committed a series of bank robberies in Southern California. This mysterious old man is accused of robbing at least 16 banks, many of them in the San Diego area. Surprisingly, this seemingly stunted elderly man has never been caught. Despite their best efforts, the FBI has been searching for this man for more than 10 years without success. The real question is, who is he? Most likely not even an old man, but a very dodgy young criminal. The old man committed his first robbery on Friday, August 28, 2009 at 11:47 a.m. The time and day are important for a reason. The robber has always had a knack for picking the right time to commit a robbery. Over the next 2 years, he robbed a total of 16 banks. 11 of these robberies occurred in San Diego County. Geezer's last confirmed robbery was recorded on December 2, 2011, after which he completely disappeared. Considering how perfect the 15 robberies were, it's no surprise that the bandit went into hiding after the last one, the 16th Geezer robbery. It was the last robbery that revealed a lot of interesting details about this robber, because this robbery was far from perfect. Simply put, the perpetrator gave himself away with some details. We'll come back to that later. The Geezer Bandit's robbery plan was straight to the point of being extremely simple and effective. A typical robber's game plan is to enter the bank as a customer and then hand the teller a note, point a revolver at them, and order them to hand over money or risk being shot. The exact words of one of the notes were, "Give me $50,000 or I will murder you." Not very many words, but it's clear and simple. Usually, the robbery takes about 3 minutes, and then the old man leaves and disappears. He always tries to draw as little attention to himself as possible during the robberies, as well as when he enters and exits the bank. In all 16 robberies, he has never been chased by the police. The burglar is believed to be an elderly man in his 70s to 80s, about 6 feet tall, weighing 190 to 200 pounds, of average build, and judging from the footage obtained, he's left-handed. However, as the robberies progressed, the FBI began to question the man's identity. It was suggested that this was not an old man, but a young or middle-aged man using a silicone mask and gloves. And truth be told, this version is supported by many facts and clues. Since most banks have a video surveillance system, plenty of visual evidence of the old man is recorded on tape. Several characteristics of Geezer can be discerned from all of these video recordings. First, he tended to wear layered clothing. Second, he always wore his hats tucked down, ranging from the usual snapbacks and baseball caps to the more stylish English hats. Third, he always wears glasses to hide his eyes. These were usually tinted sunglasses, but occasionally regular glasses with thick lenses. Clothing is usually plain, mainly jackets, shirts, blazers, and pants. Although at one robbery, the old man came in a tracksuit, sneakers, and oddly enough, rubber gloves. Another peculiarity of the old man is that he uses a small pistol, a black .38 caliber revolver. But in all 16 robberies, he has never fired it, only threatened with it. Remarkably, Geezer always holds the gun in his left hand, low and close to his body. Investigators know that the old man chooses banks and shopping malls for robberies, but what investigators hardly know is how the old man leaves the scenery of the robbery and hides away. Of the 16 Geezer robberies, there is one well-recorded sighting of the old man outside the building. June 7, 2010, Monday, 2:53 p.m. The perpetrator leisurely enters an Albertsons grocery store. Almost 5 minutes later, the old man quickly leaves the building with the money and his hands in his pockets. As always, he does not attract attention, and people passing by do not even suspect that this man has just robbed a bank. Then, the robber hides behind a white bus. 1 minute later, a white sedan pulls out from behind the bus and drives away. Investigators believe that this white car was the one in which the robber fled. Unfortunately, because of the bad image, it is hard to make out anything except the color of the car, not to mention the make and license plate number. But we'll soon find out what kind of car it was. December 2nd, 2011, Friday, 5:39 p.m. The perpetrator was already wanted since August 2009, and almost every bank employee knew about him. The Geezer Bandit had committed 15 robberies by then and probably wasn't going to stop, but it was on that day that something happened that made him stop. Upon entering the building, the suspicious old man headed toward the cashier as usual. He was carrying a planner, which was hidden under his right arm. The robber also had documents in his hand, which indicated that he had allegedly come to conduct a legitimate banking operation. Everything looked perfectly normal. As soon as the robber approached the cash register, he used his favorite maneuver. Placing the planner on the cash register, Geezer handed him a note demanding a certain amount of money. He then opened the planner and pulled out a revolver and a white plastic bag. The bandit pointed the revolver at the cashier and threatened to shoot her if she did not comply with his demands. Though she knew who it was, the cashier did not hesitate and quickly complied. The money was placed in a white plastic bag, but that was not all the cashier put in the bag. There was also a bag of ink. After receiving the money, Geezer, in his customary manner, took his time, left the building, and did not attract attention. But then something happened that he had never expected. After leaving the bank, the bag containing the money exploded. The fact is that this time the money handed to the robber was protected by a special device built into the stack of money, which, at any attempt to open it illegally, stains the banknotes with resistant paint, thereby rendering them unusable. Eventually, the package exploded, and the bandit was shocked. This was the first time anything like this had happened to him. Smoke and red paint from the dye pack covered the robber and the money. Surveillance video showed the robber falling to his knees, trying to get some money and his belongings. Geezer had attracted the attention of passers-by and needed to get out of there in a hurry. In his haste, the robber dropped his planner. After gathering what he could, the robber ran through the bank's parking lot. You heard right. A 70-year-old man suddenly ran like a young man, with speed not at all typical of such an old man. Witnesses later reported seeing a white BMW, possibly a 5 Series, fleeing the scene of the bank robbery. It's not known if the car is connected to the robbery, but a similar car was also seen during that very robbery at the Albertsons store, and it was most likely the perpetrator's vehicle. During this robbery, the robber was wearing a white shirt with a black tie, black pants, glasses, and a blue baseball cap. The robber was described as an older white male, but may have been wearing a synthetic mask and gloves to conceal his true physical characteristics. There is no doubt that this was the Geezer Bandit, and this robbery proved to be a failure for him, the first failure in 16 attempts. After that, the culprit disappeared forever. But can an old man really commit 16 bank robberies in 2 years and not get caught? His last robbery, which ended unsuccessfully, makes it even more doubtful that this really is an old man. The following details may support the theory that this is not an old man at all, but a young or middle-aged man. It's quite possible that this man is using a special silicone mask and gloves. First, most of his body is always covered with clothing, including his headgear and glasses. It's likely that he's trying to hide his real physical features in this way. For example, in this shot, you can see that the wrist of his left hand looks kind of weird, like there's a glove on his hand. After all, if it really is an old man, it would be silly to go to rob a bank with only sunglasses and a hat on his face. Another point worth noting is that the robber did not use his voice during the robberies, but only passed notes written in advance with the demand. This may also indicate that this man did not want to reveal his real voice, which was most likely not senile at all. There's another interesting point. It's reported that during one of the robberies, the old man came to the bank with an oxygen tank and used connecting tubes to breathe. Truth be told, it's hard to believe that an elderly old man with an oxygen tank and breathing tubes would rob a bank. So it was probably just another clever stunt by a clever robber. So, what conclusions can be drawn from the Geezer Bandit's latest robbery? Yes, he didn't get the money, but he still didn't leave any hard evidence other than a forgotten planner. Investigators hoped that the robber had left his DNA on it. In that case, they could have used the same method of investigation they used against Joseph James D'Angelo. Just a reminder that the killer was found using the genealogy website for finding relatives, GED Match. But judging by the fact that there is no news, nothing came of it. The main thing investors once again doubted was that the robber was an old man. After the bag exploded, the perpetrator ran at a staggering speed that an old man using an oxygen tank would never have been able to run at. A couple of years ago, a bank teller named Melissa Teixeira shared some important information. She was the teller who came face to face with the bandit, and she was the one he demanded money from during the Heritage Oaks bank robbery. This happened on May 27, 2011, and it was the Geezer Bandit's 14th robbery. Seeing that the bank she works for was being robbed, Melissa tried to make the most of the situation. At first, she wanted to press the panic button, but the perpetrator seemed to notice this and pointed a gun at her. Then, while collecting money for the bandit, she unobtrusively paid attention to him and memorized his features. I know he was wearing a mask. When he first came in, the color of his face seemed very off. It seemed almost like waxy. I noticed that there was a circular hole right in the center of the ear, and I realized it was a mask, Teixeira said. Melissa also suggested that the robber was between 20 and 30 years old. Later, she revealed another convincing fact that it was a young man wearing a mask. Classic masks used by criminals in robberies immediately arouse suspicion even before the robber enters the bank and gets to the cash register. Geezer Bandit may have been guided by the principle that everything that is brilliant is simple. He may have thought, why put on a classic mask if you can put on a new face and, under the guise of an old man, be in and out of the bank as if nothing had happened? In this way, he entered the bank quietly, without arousing any suspicion, and hid his face. It's worth noting that after the old man supposedly ended his activities of robbing banks, there were more and more cases of robberies where the criminals also used silicone masks. Silicone masks, when used properly, look extremely realistic. Cashiers and witnesses who are in a state of shock and stress during a robbery would have a hard time distinguishing a real face from such a silicone mask. The Geezer Bandit mask, on the other hand, looked like a mask made by a Hollywood company. Detectives later served a search warrant to a Hollywood mask company, seeking the names of all customers who had purchased the old man mask. But apparently, the investigators never found their man. There are several versions of who could be the bandit. One theory was that the Geezer Bandit was a Cal Poly student. No real evidence though, but given what cashier Melissa Teixeira said, anything is possible. She shared some very interesting information. About 2 weeks before the robbery at Heritage Oaks Bank, where she worked at the time, a young, thin, white man with blonde hair came into the bank and behaved very suspiciously. He asked about bank accounts, inconspicuously looked around, and seemed very unhappy. The identity of this man has never been established, but it may well have been the Geezer Bandit because apparently he always prepared carefully for his robberies. He always calculated the times when security was low. He was calculating the times when there would be a lot of cash. This was definitely someone who understood how things worked, which made investigators begin to wonder if this man was trained in law enforcement. The execution of his robberies was unmistakable, and once he made a serious mistake during the last robbery, the culprit immediately disappeared. Surprisingly, now the robber can't be prosecuted, and we will soon find out why. When the criminal was wanted, a reward of $20,000 was offered for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the Geezer Bandit. Ordinary citizens had a monetary incentive to help the investigation, but no one provided such information. So where has the notorious burglar gone? There is a possibility that Geezer had completely changed his disguise, so FBI agents were watching other bank robbers closely to see any coincidence with Geezer in behavior. Investigators also stated that the old man may have simply stopped robbing banks. In most cases, however, criminals continue to commit robberies until they are caught. This may have been different. After the botched robbery and the exploded bag of money, The criminal realized that the police might very well know that he was not an old man at all, given the speed with which he was running away. Also worth considering are the words of Melissa Teixeira, who saw a suspicious man examining the bank. With the proliferation of DNA forensics, the perpetrator unknowingly could have left his DNA behind in one of the subsequent robberies, which would have been used to trace him. The Geezer Bandit was smart and didn't seem to take any more chances. If it really was an old man, he looked 80 years old in 2010, and he may be dead by now, leaving behind a mystery that is unlikely to be revealed. But still, it's difficult to believe that this robber was an infirm old man who decided to start robbing banks at the end of his life. It was most likely a young or middle-aged man who devised a straightforward but effective way to rob banks. But the tens of thousands of dollars he robbed over 10 years ago must run out eventually. But will he go robbing again? Even if the Geezer Bandit was identified these days, he could no longer be charged with a crime. The federal statute of limitations for bank robbery is 5 years, and the California state statute of limitations for robbery is 6 years. That's good news for the criminal, but laws like this are astounding. The FBI announced that the Geezer Bandit is officially closed because the burglar can no longer be prosecuted. It looks like we may never know who the mysterious burglar was.